Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that what you wear has the power to change how you feel? Project Endure apparel is designed to remind you that easy won't make you stronger, and that growth is an uncomfortable choice that we all have the privilege to make every day. Look good, feel good, and perform good. Head to the link in the show notes to shop Project Endure apparel and keep on doing hard things. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 119. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest also here in the Philadelphia area, Neil Boyle. Neil, what's up, man?
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. You reached out about this a while back, and we've been trying to find a date to make it happen. And here we are. We just got to catch up a little bit before this, but I really don't even know where to start because there's so much I want to cover. I guess the best place to start is to say we know each other from our first full-time physical therapy jobs out of school. We were coworkers. We worked through kind of the beginning of the pandemic, which was an interesting time. And we got to know each other that way. And our friendship has evolved through the Project Endure community. And here we are in this podcast. So, Neil, if people don't know who you are, how would you introduce yourself to them?
Yeah, Joe. So first and foremost, I'm a husband. Coming up 2 years to my lovely wife. I'm a dog dad for about 3 years now. Learning the ins and outs of that. Maggie has taught me a lot about patience and responsibility. By trade, I'm a physical therapist. Like you said, that's kind of where we started our careers off. I just, I'm newly introduced to this endurance style training, which I'm excited about. That's kind of the general gist of it.
Perfect. Now, I'm going to preface this first big question of the podcast because we'll jump right in, but I'm going to preface this with I know some of your backstory, and the first time that you showed me the video that I'm assuming, are going to describe at some point on this podcast, I think my jaw was on the ground. I was just in shock. You sent it to me again today in preparation for the podcast, and I watched it a few times, and just the chills. Like, I don't even know if I have words to describe what I watched. And so, with that being said, I'll let you share all about it. But what is the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle in life? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so probably coming up on 10 years now. I was at Drexel doing my undergraduate studies. And one night, it was in February, I believe, the end of February, I was walking home at night and I was crossing Powelton Street, with anyone that's gone to Drexel is pretty familiar with. I was walking home with my one friend. It was a yellow light for both car and pedestrian. He stopped, and I went. And I stepped down the street and got hit pretty hard by a car. Flipped over the car multiple times and landed on the ground. And then after that, the one friend that I was walking with, called an ambulance. I don't remember any of this, so this is all from what was relayed back to me. But ended up with some pretty bad injuries. My arm, my leg, and my head. I had a severe concussion, head cracked open, compound fracture to my left tibia, and my ulnar and radius were both fractured. So due to the compound fracture in my left leg, they had to do surgery immediately, which is pretty interesting because I was there at 1 a.m. So it was just like an overnight ordeal, and I woke up kind of halfway through that, which at that point I thought I was essentially dead and in heaven. And then the next time I came to it, I woke up in the ICU with my family there, which was a whole nother chapter of the story, the hospital experience. But yeah, that accident kind of set me up in multiple ways for the most challenging, I'd say, year to year and a half of my life. Also, kind of coupled with the silver lining of having to grow up and learn what life is about rather than just be a kid at school. Kind of having fun with your friends and all that. Kind of showed me what the important aspects of life are, and that you need to struggle with things in order to grow. And part of me believes that that there was a rationale for why this happened. And if you have seen the video, and I can disclose it at some point so people can see it if they're interested. uh, why it happened. In the grand scheme of things, I think that it needed to happen for me to get to that next point in life.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack, and I'm excited to do it, and I figured we might as well start at the very beginning of that video, right? And I'll just describe what I watched. I watched you crossing a street from this. I guess it was just a security camera from a nearby building, and it's a little bit fuzzy, but you can clearly see you walking down a street, and your body just gets illuminated by these headlights, and that lasts for about a second, and then all of a sudden this car just enters the frame very fast, and your body exits the frame very fast, and it's over just like that. And that moment, that series of seconds, was very quick, and it started this long process for you. And so when you woke up in the hospital and you thought you were in heaven, what was that experience like? Would you mind describing that a little bit more?
Yeah. So it was my two brothers and my sister and my parents, and I'm very close to my family. My dad is my best friend, and my mom is the most caring, loving woman ever. My brothers and sisters, they love to fight with each other. They're always picking at odds, and all that. They're a little bit older. They're all in their 50s, so kind of an age gap. They're from my mom's first marriage. So yeah, I kind of came to with my brothers and sisters arguing in the room in the ICU, and then like at that point I'm like, I'm definitely not in heaven. Like this is not it, not what I was picturing. But so then I kind of realized what was going on, and kind of after that, my mom stayed with me. Everybody else kind of exited, and then I was in a lot of pain. And I have never had a serious injury like this before. So they tried me on different pain medications, only for me to learn that I'm allergic to a lot of pain medications. So they gave me like Percocet, I believe, to start out, and I got like hives all over my body. It was like super scratchy. So that was kind of the first problem. Then they gave me what's called Dilaudid, which is like this synthetic one, and that made me hallucinate. And I was like seeing shadow creatures and stuff, and I thought my mom was hallucinating next to me. Uh, and then like kind of like the what I describe as the climax of the whole ICU experience was that like in a kind of just like this pain ridden behavioral outburst, I decided that it'd be a good idea to pull my catheter out of my body. So yeah, that happened. And yeah, that was pretty much it. And then so they put me in a step down, and I kind of got a little better. And then after that, my parents, because I was living at school at the time, and my parents were like, you should probably come home with us and live with us for a while. So I did that, and that was a whole nother level of humility, because my parents, 70-year-old, they were 70 at the time, like basically waiting on me hand and foot because I had a broken arm and leg. I don't even know if I was weight bearing at that time, but yeah, like my dad was essentially showering me, like just no shame, just kind of washing me and where I needed to be washed. And my mom was bringing me all my meals, and I'm still in pain. And meanwhile, like my classes are still finishing up at school, and that next upcoming term, I was supposed to start my co-op, which is my internship, which is ironically at a NovaCare, a rehab. So that kind of transitioned me in, and I was like, there came a point where I was, starting to do stuff on my own, getting from, into the kitchen, getting to the bathroom, kind of, getting to that next level. And I'm like, hey, like I need to go back to school. And my parents were like, no, like you should stay home. And I was like, I can't like live like this forever. I have to eventually, kind of go back out of the nest. So I went back to school. And then, at that point, I started my internship at NovaCare. Luckily, I showed up literally with a boot on my foot and my arm in a sling. I'm like, I don't know how much help I'm going to be to you guys, but I'll do my best. And my boss was super nice guy, really like supportive and understanding. And he's like, yeah, like not only can you be like our aide here, you can do your rehab here, and then it'll be kind of a two-way stop for you, or two-stop shop, and you can kind of get everything you need done and be efficient. And that's exactly what I did. So 6 months there, I kind of grinded it out, worked out of my boot, kind of get back on my feet, strength training. And after that time, then I kind of took it on my own and continued to build up strength, build up mobility, and try to get back to where I was before. But I mean, all in all, I'd say to get back even close, it took me about a year. Uh, and it wasn't until probably, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 years out, that I was able to run again. And that was a huge change. I started going to Orange Theory with my wife. And I don't know if anyone's in the fitness field or not. I'm assuming that they are listening to this podcast, but going to like classes like that, sometimes you feel like, why am I paying all this money when this is what I do for a living? As a physical therapist, like I went to school for this, and then I'm going to a class and I'm going to pay them $150 a month or whatever it is. But so my wife wanted to try it, and I was like, all right, whatever, I'll try it. So then when I got there, they had these treadmills that had springs on them, and I could run without pain. And I'm like, this is incredible. So I did that for, I think we did it for probably about a year. And then I was like, you know what? I can try this on like a regular treadmill. And at that point, I guess that the bone had hardened enough that I was able to do it without pain. So then I had tried a 5K. And then recently I tried a half marathon with my wife and with her brother and his girlfriend, or yeah, his fiance now. And yeah, we did that, and 8 minute or 10-minute mile pace, but we got it done. And then as I just kind of told you earlier, Joe, like I'm planning for this Ironman, half Ironman. So in order, from where we started to where we're at, I'm pretty proud and happy of the overall change in my body, and the mental change that came with it as well.
Mm. So I want to hear more about how this incident was a catalyst for a lot of what you just described. But before we talk about that, one thing you and I had discussed a bit before we hit record was the fact that you came out of this, one, alive, and two, with injuries that some people might consider lucky, considering what happened. Now, we took, because it could have been worse. Now, we talked a little bit about the state you were in when this all happened. Can you tell us more about maybe that side of it and that side of life in general?
Yeah, so I mean, prior to kind of the accident, and even I mean, I would like to say it stopped immediately after the accident, but definitely a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, a lot of hanging out with friends constantly, and it's kind of it's always been a sort of a soft subject. Is that I do, when I drink, I do have a personality change that happens. It's very apparent. I go from more laid back guy, soft spoken, to a little bit more, a little louder, and it's something that, I really worked on trying to just kind of limit drinking and, try to improve it. And I think at this point in life, as I shared with you, Joe, like in the last month, I've totally, kind of abstained from drinking. And I think it's just a better style of life. I feel healthier. I have more energy. I'm not making, dumb decisions. I'm not, staying out, wasting money, gaining tons of calories. So, I mean, all in all, it's definitely hard. And I think the reason that I, you know, stuck with it for so long is that, there is kind of a social lubricant to it, and, an ability for you to, relax. Even before the accident, I've had pretty high level of anxiety. My dad, has anxiety, always kind of like worried about what may or may not happen. And then relaying that to me, like the classic, like, did you leave the stove on, like stuff like that. And I felt like drinking just kind of gave me that release, that ability to not have that anxiety. Uh, and, I loved it. And then, when the accident happened, it almost propelled me. It's like, because my anxiety got 1,000 times worse. I'm like, oh, geez, how did all this happen? Like, I must not have worried enough, you know? I should have thought about it rather than cutting out the drinking, which was the problem. I leaned into the drinking. I'm like, this is making me feel better. And, this is making my anxiety, less for the time being until the next morning when I have more anxiety. But yeah, I think that it's definitely a slippery slope. And for anyone out there who is having trouble with it, sometimes you just kind of have to sit back and be like, is your juice worth the squeeze? Is that short term relief of happiness or anxiety and depression or whatever you're kind of dealing with worth the money that you're spending, the calories that you're wasting, and the friendships that you might be destroying, and just the overall negative aspects that come along with it. So 1 month in, but I'm hoping that I can make this a lifestyle change for sure.
I love that, man. I relate heavily to it. I've shared this in previous episodes of the podcast, but I drank in high school, and throughout, the back half of high school into the beginning of college, and had a few bad experiences, and realized that I had never had one drink. I've also never had a legal drink, because I stopped drinking when I was 18. But it was never one. It was zero or it was a lot. And I needed to stop altogether. That was my path. And I think, for the right person, there's nothing wrong with things in moderation. There's nothing wrong with alcohol. There's nothing wrong with being responsible. However, I think that there's a lot of wisdom in the words of Lao Tzu, who said, if you don't change direction, you might end up where you're heading. And I think for a lot of us, right, we have those things in our life that, maybe they could be a vice, maybe they are a short-term solution, maybe it's a superficial fix, but we just stick with it because we're not sure we're ready to face the resistance of moving completely away from that thing. But I think what you've shared is something that a lot of people can relate to, whether it's with alcohol or with something else. I think a lot of times we have to be able to go beneath the surface to look at what the real problem is. And Rumi once said, maybe you're searching amongst the branches for what only appears in the roots. And I think a lot of people are looking in the branches and staying in the branches and too afraid to go down to the roots. And so I just appreciate you sharing that, man. And I asked the question because I know it's not something that is unique to you or to me, and that your words can definitely help. So thank you. So going back to the rehab process, you get through all that. You are now into the world of endurance sport. You are focused on improving your life. And you mentioned at the beginning that you not only believe that everything happens for a reason, but that this needed to happen. So, very in a pointed manner, could you explain why this needed to happen in your eyes for you to become the person that you're becoming?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that those big pivotal moments in life, sometimes they look like they're you can look at it like poor me, like why me, uh, and to a point, like sometimes you do need that. When I Another part of this story was that after all this accident happened, I became like very depressed and anxious and really upset, and like I did kind of have that, like, why is this happening to me? Like, I don't deserve this, like this is, and a lot of blame went on the guy that was having the accident, which in hindsight, if I wasn't drinking, I probably wouldn't have been there and I wouldn't have had the accident. So, but it's a lot easier to point your finger and be like, he was the drunk driver, this is his fault. But yeah, so I mean, the depression, the anxiety, just ate away at me. When I was living at home, like I had shared before, having my parents take care of me. After a couple of weeks, I broke one day. I started bawling my eyes out, just crying. Uh, and my dad sat next to me, and he started crying with me, and we just cried, for about 10 minutes. And that's not something that most men admit, that they've gotten to the point of tears over a lot of things. I think it's like this male macho egoism, but it's what happened. I was at a low, and I needed someone to support me, and my dad did that. He stood by me and he cried with me, and he said, like, this is tough, but it'll get better. Um, and I think that that gave me a lot of confidence in the fact that it's okay to not be okay. And in addition to that, it also taught me that sometimes you just need that social structure. You need somebody that will sit by your side not only during the good times but during the bad times. And I was fortunate enough that I had such a strong family structure. I know a lot of people, they aren't as close with their family or they don't have somebody, but at that time I needed him and he was there. And I think that taught me a lot of lessons about giving, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, and saying stuff and being there for people, because a lot of times, if people need you more than you expect. So as far as kind of like what she asked, like I don't think that I would have before the accident been like that vulnerable, and not I think I would have been more of more conservative, not really saying much, internalizing, a lot of internalizing, using negative habits like such as drinking, such as stuff like that, to you cope with that stuff rather than looking outward to other people, leaning on others, and kind of taking a different mindset for dealing with the struggles in life. And I think it just took this significant challenge to teach me that lesson. So I think from mental health aspect, it needed to happen because I think my dad, unbeknownst to him, kind of gave me a lot of anxiety because of his anxieties in life, and he never like dealt with them. So he kind of thought that that was the way to deal with them, is to make you worried all the time, rather than kind of teaching you that bad things in life happen, but the world's not out to get you. So I think that breaking that chain, hopefully for when me and my wife do have children, I can make them understand that the world isn't always the nicest place in the world, but also not teach them to be fearful of everybody and everyone, and that there are a lot of good people out there that want to help other people. Um, so yeah, I think that that from that aspect, it was a growing experience, and it needed to happen to change my outlook on mental health, and understand it and be vulnerable, and explain not only to myself but to others that it is okay to not be okay sometimes.
Mm. I've got a lot of thoughts and I'll just share them as they come. So, first, I started this podcast not knowing where it would go. I knew that I wanted people to be vulnerable and to share their struggles and to share their stories so that other people could feel encouraged. However, what I didn't realize was that without hearing other people's stories, we tend to just attach ourselves to whatever's right in front of us. And so, to your point, the parents that raise us, the people that we're around, if we don't search outwardly for other examples, for other perspectives, for other mindsets, and we just internalize the things that we're seeing right in front of us, then likely we will end up where we're headed. We will act that way, we will believe those things, we will become those people. And that's not a bad thing. But I think one of the beautiful things about what you're saying is that we do have a choice in who we become. We do have a choice in the perspective that we choose. And one of my hopes for this podcast is that conversations like this, people like you, Neil, and all of the guests can serve as examples and frameworks for people who want to change their perspective, to see the world in a different way, who might not have the role model in front of them for numerous reasons and just want guidance. And so, thank you for sharing. Two, I think it's natural for whatever reason, and I don't know why, to play victim. I think when hard things happen to us, no matter who we are or how much we have worked to reframe our mindsets, it's just natural to, for a second at least, feel like a victim, to feel self pity, to feel down, to feel like life is unfair. Why did this have to happen to me? And I think it takes a lot of work and sometimes big adversities to help us shift and reframe and say, this didn't happen to me, but maybe this was happening for me. I'm not a victim because I do have control in this situation. I get to choose how I respond and how I move forward. And then third, I am so inspired by what you shared about your dad sitting down next to you and crying. You haven't just become more of a vulnerable person. You reached out to be on this podcast, which I appreciate, to share things like that with thousands of people listening. And that's a whole nother level of being vulnerable. And I see so much value in that. And I think in a world that is becoming softer in a lot of ways, or at least in this circle, in this sphere, the people who listen to this podcast understand what it looks like to be gentle, what it looks like not to harden ourselves to the emotions we feel and the things of this world. We get it, but still a lot of people don't. And it is so okay to cry. There's actually a great Johnny Depp quote where he said, people cry not because they're weak, it's because they've been strong for too long. And I think it just goes to show that like we are all human. We all have those moments and we can't all be strong all the time, always. And it is absolutely okay to cry. And the one other lesson, and then I'll hear your thoughts. I think it's so cool that your dad just sat and cried with you because sometimes there just aren't words. And sometimes you just need to be there and to feel what you're feeling with that other person. So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, my dad is an incredible human being, and I'd be lost without him. So I hope that everybody can find that person in their life that will stick by them, in those dark times, because this you can't get along in this world without assistance and without leaning on somebody. It's just too much. So try to find that person.
Agreed. I mean, Neil, if people are listening to this and they hopefully are listening to this because they are already part of the Project Endure community, and if they are not, this is an open invite. Everyone is welcome. But outside of a community like this, if you had to start from scratch, where do you think you would look for somebody to be a support for you, to be an encourager?
That's a tough question. I don't know. I think starting. I don't know.
I got you.
I think that that's probably the reason that something like this community is so unique, is that there aren't. I mean, I guess you could go try to find them at in your career, at work, or at like religious groups, or at sporting groups. However, I mean, I think that unfortunately, the world that we live in is very click oriented, and sometimes it is hard to invade other groups of people, or kind of find a new circle of people. You know, because it's just hard. It's socially awkward. It's challenging, and that's why there should be more groups like this that create a sense of community and openness. Even the communities that there are in this world, a lot of them are closed off. You have to be of certain belief, or of certain wealth, or of certain whatever, and a lot of times those that red tape holds a lot of good people from getting into groups, and a lot of great people from meeting, coming together, coming up with great ideas. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But, I think that, trying to find the good groups that are open and willing to, bring in like Project Endure, um, is valuable, because it gives you that, opportunity to find your person, the person that you can lean on, and that, maybe they need to lean on you. And, because that's what the world that we live in is, very socially demanding, but there aren't many opportunities.
Mm. That was not a setup, by the way, to plug Project Endure, but I appreciate that's where your mind went. And I think come as you are is a phrase that I hope people can feel is true about our community. And you can come as you are, whoever you are. And we would love to welcome you. And Neil, I'll just say this between you and me, I wasn't planning on sharing this, but as as someone who left a full-time job, and we left not too long apart from each other, but I left to start this. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I didn't know what I was doing. And it just means so much to me that you and Sarah, your wife, came to the event this year. Like just watching you guys walk in the door and getting to give you a big hug and watch you engage and just participate and be there and have fun. I hope it means more than you know, as somebody who, like, this is now what I do with my life. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's no problem. I'm just happy to be part of it. Support a friend. Like I said, it's a great community. I like what you guys stand for, and even encouraging me to step out of my comfort zone and try an Ironman, even though I'm working on not drowning right now.
That's an important first step in the Ironman process.
But
So let me ask you this, Neil. We talked a lot about the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle, but what is the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose? And it might be one of the things you mentioned, but we'll just go deeper into it. What's the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose?
yeah, I mean, I think that me leaving, Fit Life at the time we did, I took a management job uh, at Ivy Rehab now, and I think that becoming a manager and having to learn leadership skills and all the different things that come with management was probably one of the hardest things I've chosen to do on purpose. And just career development in general. Like I'm also doing an EMG residency, so kind of combining all of those next level career things together has been a long haul. But yeah, having to like fire people, hire people, and coming out relatively new grad. I think it was my second year, I guess third year is when I started the management thing. Just 3 years out, and you're trying to manage people that have been in the field for 20 years and wear that hat. It's uncomfortable, and it teaches you a lot of things about yourself. Teaches you what your weaknesses are. I think most and first and foremost, which ironically for me is communication, um, because I'm very good at communicating in person, but like via email and text messages, a lot of times I just let it go because I didn't really think about it. But you can't do that if you're the manager. You gotta answer your calls and send out, stay on top of people and sort of micromanage from time to time. So, but yeah, I mean, after a year and a half of that, I just learned that because I don't view myself as a type A person. I'm never organization and stuff like that have always been a challenge. I just realized that it kind of wasn't my top cup of tea. And that was also challenging in itself because a lot of times I was like, I need to get out of this job. But then I'm like, I'm not a quitter. I don't label myself as a quitter. Like I'm not quitting this. Just because it's hard, I'm not going to quit. Um, but like I think that after a while, I realized that it wasn't really quitting. It was just opening up my time to allow for more opportunities to do things that I saw more value in. Such as spending time with my family. Such as putting more time into my EMGs, which is kind of my long term goal. And just having a better quality of life in general. Kind of truly like working to live, not live to work. Um, because I mean, for certain people, work is life, and if that makes them happy, then that's fine. But for me, I think that there's more to life, and in having a near death experience, I wanted to use my time, the short time that we have, because you never know when it's going to end, to do things that make me happy and that I like. And that is spending time with my mom and dad. That is with my wife and my dog. And you know, it's hard to do that when you're putting all of your time and energy into a job that doesn't really. I mean, not saying that it's not going to have career development with it, but I mean, pretty much that's once you're a manager at a job, that's kind of where you're going to be. Um, and just it's sometimes it's just not worth it. You shouldn't view something like that as quitting, but rather just kind of moving on to the next option. That it's one of the best decisions that I've made to date. But yeah, the process of learning all of that, and I had an amazing mentor. My boss was great. He was the nicest guy in the world and taught me, more in a year than I've learned in 5. But I mean, it was, high stress, and already with my stress level, adding more stress to it, but I wasn't the smartest decision in the world. But I mean, it was a good learning experience, but I didn't see it as a lifelong thing. But I view that portion of my career as probably the hardest thing that I've chosen to do on purpose. Um,
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between quitting and pivoting, or quitting because something is hard versus pivoting and making that adjustment to put your energy and effort in something that is more in alignment with where you want to go and what you value. Episode 84 of this podcast with Colin Raddick is a great conversation on that topic. But for me, Neil, the words you're saying are hitting deep because I am the person that gets fulfillment out of work. It wasn't always the case, but since starting Project Endure, that's become the case. And I have this internal battle that I'll share in a second and then ask a selfish question because I think you have a different perspective. I struggle so much with the idea of taking my foot off the gas, with the idea of rest, with the idea of not constantly pushing the ball forward. And again, I enjoy a lot of that. And at the same time, I recognize that there are also more important things in life, like time with the people that we love. And I struggle navigating those two things. In your experience, after the near death experience, what is it that you would tell somebody like me who struggles to put the phone down, to stop sending the emails, to just chill out?
yeah, I think that an old saying, stop and smell the roses, is something that I kind of gravitate towards. You know, because if you do find enjoyment in work, as you're saying that you do, it's important to explore that happiness and build your business and your career. But you also have to kind of carve out time for the other things that are important, like your wife, like your dog, like your kids, and I'm not an entrepreneur, so I can't speak to it because I've heard that you kind of have to dive in, full speed, so to speak, for it to be meaningful and so that it doesn't fail. Um, However, I mean when you look back, I don't know. I've heard this study. I'm not sure exactly. I can't quote it, but they asked like a lot of people on their deathbeds, essentially, what did you, what did you regret, and like what, and I think most people say that they wish they had worked less and spent more time with their family and doing the things that they love. Um, so I mean, like money, you can't take it with you, so it's you spend the time doing what you want to do, and like I said, if that is work, then do that thing. But if it is your family and it is your wife, also do that. So I think just follow your heart. That's kind of the main thing. And don't always get fixated on the small things, because if you spend all night worrying about that email that you sent or this or that, you kind of miss out on the bigger picture. It's not stuff you're going to remember in 20 years. What you're going to remember is that night you spent with your wife, or that the time you got your new puppy, or the time your kid was born. So be there for those moments. Don't necessarily get fixated on the rat race or the grind, even though I mean, to be successful in today's age, you got to do it. You got to find that middle ground, that moderation. But I mean, like I said, you got to stop and smell those roses sometimes and enjoy life.
Mm. Yeah, and just to add to that, and I'm speaking to myself, I think the way that we spend our money and our time are probably two of the biggest votes for the person that we want to become. How we spend our money and our time is probably the best look into the window of who we are and what we value deep down inside. And so, if you are not spending your time and money on the things that actually matter, it's time to check that and change that. And I appreciate you, Neil. So, with that being said, I want to hear what the word endurance means to you as somebody who is venturing into the world of endurance.
Okay, so my knowledge of like true like athletic endurance, I mean, besides being a physical therapy, is limited. So I did mine kind of more based on life. So I wrote this down too because I was like, I wanted to sound very, but yeah, so I said endurance is the pursuit of a passion that is constructive to your character and wellness with unwavered persistence.
Can you read that again?
Yeah. So endurance is the pursuit of a passion that is constructive to your character and wellness with unwavering persistence.
That's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad
So
you wrote that down.
Yeah, so I broke it down into like three components basically. So like the first part is the what, it's your direction, which is the pursuit of a passion. Like what is your goal here? If you're running a race, what's your goal? You want to get to the finish line. So that's, and you can do that in anything. If you're going back to school, what's your goal? To get a degree. Um, and then you got to have the why behind it. Why? What's the point of it? Why are you running that race? Why are you going back to school? And I think in a lot of ways it has to be constructive to your character, or wellness. Like you're trying to improve your physique, or you're trying to improve your mindset. And then the last part, I think that everybody kind of, when they get asked this question, they always gravitate towards, what is endurance? It's working hard. It's perseverance. It's dedication. So I think that that's another portion of it, and that's the how, the grind, the grit, the sweat, the blood, so to speak, that you put into making that dream happen. So I think from a life standpoint, that's kind of my definition of endurance. And those are kind of the three components that I think you need to, be successful with it.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Neil, without being able to sift through the specific definitions from all previous 118 episodes. This might be my favorite definition I've ever heard of endurance. That is good. Uh,
Thank you. Appreciate
yeah.
that.
You sure? Are you sure you didn't plagiarize that?
I didn't. That's 100% authentic.
I really love the part about it needing to be constructive to your character, because I do think that a lot of people are doing things that they might consider endurance, and in reality, it's just exhaustion. Because it might not be constructive to their character, or it might not be toward a passion. It might just be movement for the sake of movement. It might be running on a hamster wheel and they are not going anywhere. And I think that the constructive to the character piece of things is so important to intentionally pursue something that is going to make you into the person that you want to become. Should be a key part of what it means to endure. And I will add to this, a lot of times we don't get to choose what we are forced to endure. And in that context, we have to choose to see that thing, to see those circumstances as something that can elevate our character, even when we didn't choose that thing. And I think that's a really hard part of endurance for a lot of people. So, Neil, with that being said, we're going to transition toward the last question here, but I have a smaller question for you, one that I've been asking a few guests here and there, and one that I'm just curious about. When you think about your life and you think about all the hard questions that people have asked you or could ask you, what's the hardest question that you've either been asked or could be asked?
Yeah, I think so. This is the first question your parents ask you when you get to age is, what do you want to do with your life? What do you aspire to be? What do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that that's kind of the question that, you have to kind of just take a shot at and see if it's the right choice. Part of the reason that I did go to Drexel was for that co-op opportunity, because I had no idea if this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I think a lot of people go into that, as kids, starting, you get forced with making a decision pretty early on what you want to do. I don't think that anyone really knows truly what they want to do until they've gone through some experiences to determine how much they like it. I mean, how many career changes do people have, and major changes and all that. And I think it's a hard question for a lot of people. And when I started out, I didn't know I wanted to go into the medical field. I wanted to originally be a dentist. And I went to a dentist office, my childhood dentist, and I shadowed it for like 2 months, 2 or 3 months, and I realized it was terrible. Nobody is ever happy going to or coming from a dentist. There's really no, there's really no enjoyment in it. I mean, I guess there's a couple here and there, but the vast majority where, and then I was like, what can I do that people will enjoy going to? And I think physical therapy and um, you know just athletics and physical training in general, a lot of people, are happy with, the fact that they can improve themselves in a lot of ways like that. So I think it just takes time to figure out that question. But I think in general, that probably was and is the hardest question that I've ever been asked. And, there's days that I'm still like, is this what I want to do? I mean, I'm not even going into physical therapy anymore. I'm moving into electrodiagnostics. So, I mean, it's, still changing my mind. And hey, maybe I won't even like that in 5 years and I'll switch it up again. But, that's a tough question.
That's a very tough question, and I would imagine a question that everybody listening can relate to on some level. And I'll go back a few episodes and talk about a topic that I feel very convicted on, which is we as human beings will never have it all figured out. We won't. There are too many variables. Every single day is a brand new experience that we've never lived before. And to your point, sometimes you just have to step out into the unknown and give something a fair shot and see if you like it, see if you don't. And if not, make an adjustment and go on to the next thing. But I think we have to keep moving forward. And also at that, I'm not sure it matters so much what we do. Maybe it matters more how we do it and the spirit with which we do it. And of course, if you're talking about a profession, you as the person in the profession need to enjoy it to a certain degree. But are there 20 different professions that you, Neil Boyle, could do and probably find fulfilling and enjoy? Yeah, of course. But do you need to find the one? No. You just need to find something that you can be happy with, that you can work hard toward, and that your definition of endurance can fit into. And I think if you can do that, I think you can live a very happy, fulfilling, and successful life. And so, with that being said, Neil, there are people listening to this who have no idea what they want to do with their lives, who have no idea how to even get up tomorrow and put one foot in front of the other. There are people all over the world struggling with so many different things. Some of them got hit by a car, some of them feel like proverbially they got hit by a car. And you get a chance now to share any encouragement, any guidance with everybody listening. What would you say to somebody who's in a tough spot or a dark place at this moment?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think one, just find comfort in knowing that you're not alone. There's lots of people that have gone through trials and tribulations, and they come out better for it. So that's probably the first takeaway. Also, like I said earlier in our conversation, is find that person or that group that you can lean on and that you can provide, a platform for them to lean on you if needed. Because this world is a very social, entwined world, and it's important to, put yourself out there so that you can help and be helped. So I think that those two are pretty valuable, and then probably third is just find positive, constructive habits uh, to spend your time and money on. You know, like I said earlier, alcohol is one that I leaned on for a while, and leaning more on fitness, leaning more on family. I think that that's the healthier option for me. I mean, maybe for other people, it's different, but I think that those are probably strong ways to improve your predicament. And just know that nothing lasts forever. The good times and the bad times, it all changes and it comes and goes. So just kind of ride it out and see where it takes you.
I love all of that, Neil, and I'm thankful for you sharing. I know that not only that last question, but all of your story and all of this conversation has the potential to change somebody's day, change somebody's mind, change somebody's life. And if people are listening and they want to connect with you, they want to reach out and ask a question, or they just want to follow along and see what you're up to, where's the best place for somebody to do that?
Yeah, so my personal Instagram is a pretty good place, Nearly B05. Also, you can always reach out to Joe. You got my phone number. I'm pretty good at responding that way. Um, my social media platform hasn't been as strong. Something that I'd like to work on in the future, but as of right now, just good old fashioned text or email. My email is neilboyle03@gmail.com. It's a good way to get a hold of me as well.
Neil, I will link your Instagram in the description in case anybody's just curious. And then if anybody wants to reach out and wants your number, reach out to me and I'll connect you. And just thank you again for this conversation, for our friendship, for everything that you're pursuing. I appreciate it, and I know the world appreciates it. So keep up the great work, man. I can't wait to see where it takes you.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.